Welcome to this episode of the Three Pillars Academy. Today we are joined by Chelsea Day, sports psychologist at The Ohio State University. May is Mental Health Month, so we're really excited for this conversation surrounding the current situation we're in with the COVID-19 pandemic, student athlete, coaches, administrator, mental health, all in this. So thank you, Chelsea, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
First, let's just kick it off with briefly getting a little bit of your background and the work that you do at the Ohio State University.
So I was a diver at Miami University, MACtion, and it was a really wonderful experience for me. I loved my time at Miami. I always knew I wanted to do something in psychology, and shortly into my time at Miami, I realized that sports psychology interested me. I think it's because I could have used a sports psychologist, probably both from a mental health perspective as someone who battled injury and ended up having that as one of the reasons that my career ended, and not coping particularly well. I mean, it was fun, but maybe not the smartest way to cope, which was through risky behaviors and drinking and things that I hate to see my athletes do now. And so decided that's what I was going to do. I didn't really know what a sports psychologist did, but figured I'd figure it out along the way. And luckily I love it. I went and did graduate school in New Hampshire. I volunteer assistant coached diving while I was up there. I learned coaching is not for me. God bless all the coaches. I am not cut out for coaching life. I then did an internship in Detroit at Oakland University. And then have done a couple of different things. I have been at Ohio State since end of September and was at Indiana University as the director of counseling and sports psychology for 3 years prior to that. So college athletics is where my heart is. It's where I intend to spend my career. It's just kind of what feeds my soul.
That's great. Second question here. In your profession, what have been some of those key topics of discussion, especially during this time, as student athletes, coaches, administrators are away from campus and those resources that they may have accessed while being on campus?
One of the big things that has always been important to me is availability and access to services. And not every school has services like we do. We are super blessed to have the budgets that we do, to have the personnel that we do. But whatever the resources are that are available, for me, a big piece has been, access and availability. And that doesn't just mean them being available. It means how are we educating student athletes that they are available? What are the barriers to them accessing things that are? Is it education about the services? Is it stigma? Is it their own histories? And I think that has been even more illuminated now that we're working remotely, that, how are people accessing these services? How are we making them available? What other ways can we meet some of these needs? Obviously, as a sports psychologist, I think that everyone should be talking to a sports psychologist, but I also know that not everyone needs to talk to us all the time. And so, access and availability to services also looks like other ways, information, videos, social media, different apps. And so I think that's a thing that has been evolving. And I think that COVID-19 has amplified that and moved it much more quickly in terms of how do we reach these student athletes with the support they need in a way that's going to be accessible to them.
And because of COVID-19, we've been in quarantine, and that's taken us physically, mentally away from connecting and engaging. So what can you tell us about adjusting during this time?
One amazing thing is that we're dealing with a really cool generation. So I talk a fair bit about Gen Z, and that's all of our college kids right now. I love Gen Z. They are less hated on than millennials, but they're still hated on. But I think that they are uniquely equipped for this. And I think that this cohort of student athletes might be better equipped than some of us non-Gen Zers in that they know how to utilize technology. They know how to connect with each other in what we consider non-traditional ways. And so I think it's really been, how do we keep them engaged with things outside of their normal sphere? I think they're doing good at phone calls and Zooms with friends. And I think they probably have slightly less Zoom fatigue than some of us older people who are like, oh my gosh. But I do think that it's having to reach out and connect with them and meet them where they're at. That's a big thought of mine is, how do we meet them where they're at? I think that our student athletes are meeting each other where they're at pretty good and doing a decent job at physical distancing without social distancing. But we still need to reach them with all of the important things. And whether we're talking about sports medicine or sports psychology or nutrition, that we are really working on meeting them where they are in their homes or in their apartments or wherever they're quarantining. And I think that that's been the bigger barrier. I think that, again, they're really resilient and really skilled. And so I think it's really been a challenge for us to figure out how to keep them engaged with us, because I think they're doing a good job with each other.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's important. It's always good to meet people where they are. When we think about mental health or self-care, what are some of the ways that student athletes, coaches, administrators have responded or can respond to the current situation?
I think coaches in particular have done a really awesome job of taking initiative and reaching out, at least, and across different conferences, all different coaches I've talked to, not just our own. I really commend a lot of our coaches and leaders for stepping up and doing that. I think administrators have really, opened the door into their lives. So I've seen a lot of administrators who are making videos of what they're doing in their lives now, kind of what they're, where you're getting to see what their houses look like, or, you see their dog running by. And I think that goes a long way to strengthening those relationships and making our student athletes feel like a part of something bigger than themselves, and connecting coaches and administrators and athletes in ways that you don't really get to do when everyone's actually on campus, because we're all meeting in those shared spaces. So I think that's one really great thing. I think that there's something about virtual meeting that has been really cool as well in terms of mental health and wellness and self-care, in that it's easier to be more intentionally engaged. It's easy for me to sit in a room with 4 people and be checked out while people are talking. But when you're one-on-one with a computer, there's something about it that sometimes feels a little bit more intentional. Or having conversations with people that you wouldn't, right? Like coaches, they're seeing their athletes every day. And so I think they take that for granted on both ends a little bit, because, it's passive interaction. And now we have this intentional interaction where they are having to seek out the interaction and engage in purposeful conversation. And so I think that that's been a really cool way that, I think has really benefited all of our emotional, social functioning. And it's really neat, and that I hope continues when we all kind of get back to whatever normal is going to look like, that, we continue active interaction and not go back to just more passive interaction of this passerby's, hey, how are yous?
Yeah, I do think it'll be interesting to see after we go into whatever that new normal is, of just how you've seen your friends and family and interacted and engaged with them in such a different way, that now maybe that becomes your new normal.
And that's where I have a lot of hope. Like, I have a lot of hope that we're going to come out the other side of this as like more compassionate, intentionally connected people. How long that lasts, I don't know, but I think at least on the immediate other side of this, we might really see some fruitful growth in relationships.
Absolutely. So there are so many resources available online where you can find apps and different booklets and resources, information. What are some of those ways that we can all engage and seek out that help if that help is needed?
We are inundated with information from so many different places. And so, I'll give the caveat that I'm aware of the things that I interact with, and there's way more than the stuff that I know. I think that there are a lot of really wonderful apps. The Big Ten just announced a partnership with Calm. So I'm excited to dig into that. I haven't really, because it's expensive, and I'm excited that we have a partnership and to get to see more of that. But, there are a lot of other really cool apps. And so, I'm very much if anyone's already using an app they like, keep using it. Like, if it works for you, do it, embrace it, engage in it. And then look for other ones. I might say, hey, there's an app that I love called Stop, Breathe, Think. I just think it's a phenomenal app. I love the way you interface with it. And I have people that hate it, and that's okay. So I think that some of it is really investing in the time to seek out to find what might work for you. In the same way, even just regular activities. So I like doing puzzles. Puzzles are a way for me to turn off my brain and just engage with the pieces. These puzzles. I don't like adult coloring books. They make me really angry because I'm not great at like staying in the lines, and I don't have enough colors. And then if you do it wrong and now you have two blues next to each other, it's not my jam. And, I think the one big thing is my overarching thing is try things out, give new things a try. If what you've done before isn't working, if the book that you normally read or the songs you usually listen to or the scripture you normally go to isn't quite fitting anymore, that's okay. Try something new. Give knitting a try. If you hate it, you have a funny story. Learn how to do calligraphy on YouTube. If you suck at it, it's a funny story. It's done. You don't have to keep doing it. So for me, in terms of finding those resources, I don't know that there's any one that's better than another. I think it's really that individualized kind of what fits for us. And what works for me, you might be like, you're crazy, that sucks. In the same way, I might think that about how other people do. So, I think that it's really about seeking things out, investing in that. If you think about the amount of time we all spend scrolling through Instagram, if we took 20% of that time and scrolled through the App Store and looked for apps, or Googled mindfulness and looked for different mindfulness websites and found some that connected to us, we'd find that stuff that fits for us. But I think it's easy to get frustrated when it doesn't fit and to give up on it and move on, because I think it feels like it should be easier. Because we don't have a lot of self-compassion. And so, it's really about finding the right fit for each of us.
Yeah, I think that's important to remember, that what works for one person might not work for you, and vice versa. So lastly, can you give us some tangible takeaways on things to focus to help us, students, coaches, anyone, to kind of get through these unknown times?
I think prioritize what works. So, I think even those of us that are, there are still some people I know that are very busy and their days are pretty packed. But I think for most of us, we tend to think of coping strategies and self-care strategies as like if I have time or when I can fit them in. And even now, I think that's true because we have so much time. We'll just fit it in. I'll do that thing. But I think that scheduling that stuff in is important. I think that for students sit down and they write out when their classes are. And they block that time out. Okay, block out the time that you're going to do to read a book for leisure, or that you're going to, build that Lego set, or that you're going to meet with a friend and play whatever the game is that you're playing. Block it out. Make that intentional. I think another really important strategy is to be intentional about what we're reading and what we're looking at. That, if we find we're inundated with statistics and data and that it's really making us feel anxious, that we need to go on a data diet. And how do I find sources that are good for me and control when I engage in them? I think planning for the future is really important. We have an unknown end time, but thinking about what am I looking forward to? How do I get excited about it? Gratitude is a really awesome strategy. So, whether it's once a week or once a day, sitting down and saying, okay, what are 3 things I'm grateful for? And maybe it's been a really boring day and a frustrating day and a scary day. And maybe the only thing I can come up with is that I'm grateful that I have flyaways in my hair and that my water was cold and that I had chapstick next to me when I needed it. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's the best I can come up with. Okay. There's a way that thinking in a gratitude sense can fundamentally change some of the ways that we're thinking. And so I think those are a couple of really easy, important strategies. I was listening to a podcast on parenting the other night, and there was this one really cool activity that I just had heard of, and I've told like 3 people about it, and I'm obsessed with it, and I'm going to start doing it. And when my kid's old enough, I'm going to make her do it. And it's a suggestion. It's from the author of the book, Emotional Agility, which everyone should read. And you put your hand on paper and you trace it like you would when you make a hand turkey. And on each of your fingers, you write something that you're looking forward to. And it's this idea that it's a way to connect it to ourselves. It's not just a list. It's our hand. We're seeing it in like a creative format. And it's just 5 things we're looking forward to. And maybe it's things I'm looking forward to tomorrow. Maybe it's things I'm looking forward to next month. Maybe it's things I'm looking forward to when we get back to campus, even if that's not for a while. But it gives us this visual, tangible way to do that. And I just thought it was the coolest activity that I'm super excited about. So I will share it with all of you.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I'm going to do that after this call. Just, it sounds like an amazing idea. Well, thank you, Chelsea. So many great takeaways in this conversation about meeting people where they're at, staying connected, finding those unique ways, just little things day to day, gratitude. One thing may not fit for you, but for another, all these pieces really to prioritize our mental health, our self-care in these such of unknown times. So thank you again, Chelsea, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.